This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Welcome, everyone. Welcome all our Torah Anytime viewers. Let's put this on vibrate. Okay, everybody, all women are welcome to join us at 1601 Quentin Road on Thursdays at 8 p.m. to join this amazing, uplifting, crazy, inspirational, unbelievable food, and there's also a class as well besides that. Okay, so now let us begin. Let's get right into it. We're learning tonight Shlima to Yecheskel Ben Tzila. So we are on class number 3 on the 13 principles of faith. Now we discussed before on how important these 13 principles are, how you have to believe in these 13 principles, and if you don't believe in many of these 13 principles, the reason why I say many is because, well, stay tuned for the future classes, you'll see why, but if you don't believe in many of these 13 principles of faith, a person can lose his share in the world to come. And we stated last week we stated how severe that is, how somebody could lose everything that they've worked for if they don't believe in these 13 principles of faith. These are the foundations of Judaism. These are really the foundations, and if you don't have this, you lose everything. So tonight we're going on number 5, B'ezrat Hashem. But I want to first do a quick recap on the first 4 because they sort of lead up to to the 5th one. So we started off with number 1. Number 1, the idea of the first of the 13 principles of faith is that God exists. Now, it seems very obvious, for many people that God exists, but in a sense, there's more details than just the existence of God than meets the eye. Number 1, that God is the creator, which this is fairly simple. People, have an easier time understanding it, that God is the creator, meaning that He created, not like we create something, but He created something that we can even begin to understand and comprehend, the creation that God is capable of, meaning that God is able to take nothing and make something. That is the creator. Yesh me'ayin is known as. Furthermore, still in the first principle, that God is a manig. Manig is God is an overseer. God supervises everything. If I were to say one of the hardest ones, I would say probably that little iota of it, the idea that God supervises everything. And yesterday I was speaking about a similar topic, and one of the guys in the class were like, "Well, that's so easy. Of course, God supervises everything." I'm like, "Wait, how much do you comprehend that? Do you ever get upset at anything ever?" Because if you do, that means you don't really, you understand it and you got the 13 principles, you got the check over there. But to really believe that means that you'll never get upset on anything, that God supervises everything, which means is that when something goes bad, that's okay. When something goes good, that's also okay. I saw this picture of one of the Breslov Rabbanim, I forgot who it was, and he goes like this, and it says that Emunah doesn't mean that everything will be okay. Emunah means that whatever turns out, you'll be okay. That no matter, it's the way, the perspective, the way that we see things. So if you actually believe, and this is a very high level, if you actually believe that God supervises everything and you could actually live that, then you won't be upset about everything. So that is the first of the 13 principles of faith. Now, the idea is obviously, it's very difficult to reach that high level that nothing will ever bother you, but you have to understand that God supervises everything, God created everything, God is independent of everything and anyone and anything. Number 2 is the idea that God is one, the unity of God. Now, when we mention unity, meaning that the good, the bad, and the ugly all comes from God. There's no dual forces. There's no other, powers that are coming in. There's nothing that, it came in, but God didn't see it. Everything that happens in your life, good and the bad, all comes directly from God. The idea also that angels as well are all part of God. They're not any independent being, and that's what we're going to get to today. B'ezrat Hashem, we'll speak about that. You're not allowed to even pray to angels, and the idea is that angels are nothing. They're like an extenuation of God. You think of the angels. I think the way that we explained it is angels is like a glove to God's hand. Again, God is incorporeal. Whatever. Well, the idea is that they're not independent. There's nothing independent other than God. That is number 2. Number 3 is that God is incorporeal, meaning that God does not have any physical form. Not only does God not have any physical form, this I find also to be a very, very difficult one to actually live, because many people, when the second that you say God, you picture something. The second that you picture something, you're done. Like you can't picture anything. Like there's nothing there. You can't put any physical attribute to God. Even further, you can't put any physical image to God. Furthermore, not only physicality, but also spirituality. We said that God created physical and God created spiritual also. We mentioned that God created the physical world, the earth. When God created the aretz, the earth, that means that God created all physical things. And when it says Shemayim, that God created the heavens, that means all spiritual things. So God created physical and God created spiritual. God is not spiritual. People have a very hard time, understanding this. Spirituality is a creation. God is above spirituality. God is and it's hard for us to comprehend that. Now, the most important aspect that we have to understand over here is that God is not physical. That is what the third of the 13 principles of faith I mentioned, that God is not a physical. And even though the Torah brings down many physical attributes, God's arm, God's strength, God's all these different things that seem to be anthropomorphic ideas about God, these are only, says the Gemara in Brachot, only in a way that we be able to understand it. The Gemara and the Torah speaks in a way that man can understand. That is why the Torah speaks it in that manner. And finally, number 4 is that it speaks about the eternity of God. God is eternal, was before everything, will be after everything. God is not bound to space and time. God is, infinite. The idea between the third and the fourth, and I don't know if you guys are following the theme over here. The theme over here really is that we don't understand God. We don't know God. We know one thing: God exists. About more than God, we cannot begin to comprehend it. So in the third principle, we said that God is not. There's no physical attributes of God. That is meaning, based on our human limitations, we cannot understand God. When we went on to the fourth principle and we said that God is above time, God was before and afterwards, what we're really saying is that not only do we not understand God because of our human limitations, we don't understand God because of all limitations of reality. The reality that we understand, that we can't even begin to comprehend it. Now, I know this is very philosophical and sometimes it's very hard to comprehend, but I think the gist of it is very, very simple. God is the creator. God created the world. God is one. God is incorporeal. There's no physicality to him, and God is eternal. Fairly simple, right? You guys are with me so far? Any questions on that? The last no? Okay, good. Okay, let us begin with the fifth principle. That was just an introduction, and you'll soon see why we need to deal with it with the previous principles. The fifth principle of faith is ani ma'amin be'emuna shlema. I believe with perfect faith, with perfect knowledge, שהבורא יתברך שמו, that God lo לבדו ראוי להתפלל, that you're only able to pray only to God. ואין ראוי להתפלל לזולתו, and you don't have the ability, you're not able, it's inappropriate to pray to anybody else. So this is a very, very interesting principle, that the only one to pray, worship, is only God, and you're not allowed to worship anybody else. We have over here a positive and we have over here a negative. The positive is that we can only pray to God. A negative, we cannot pray to anybody else. So I want to break it up into that thing. I want to first discuss about the negative, like what we're not supposed to do, and then maybe figure out what we are supposed to do. And this is really going to be a class to try to understand and comprehend prayer. And in fact, I feel like this class is so important that I do want to give a class about prayer, in like a series actually on prayer, and I'm going to have to repeat this. Like, I'm actually preparing to repeat this information. Usually, if you don't have enough information, you have to. This is so important that I'm intending on repeating again. That's how important today's class is regarding tefillah, regarding prayer, to understand and comprehend what it means to pray and how it means to pray and how you should not pray. So, first and foremost, the source for this is in Devarim, chapter 4, verse 19. It says, the Torah says that God was saying that lest you should look up to the heavens. You'll see the stars and the moon and you'll want to worship them. Don't worship them. Don't be drawn to them. Also in Exodus chapter 20, verse 3, it says, Lo yeh lecha elokim acharim. You're not allowed to have any other gods before me. You're only allowed to pray to God, and that is it. This is what the Rambam says. The Rambam calls a min. A min is somebody who, one of the categories of min is someone who serves a star or a constellation as a sort of an advocate, an in-between between me and God. There's an intermediary. That type of person that believes that there's an intermediary, that person has no share in the world to come. So, let us try to explain what this means. In order to begin to explain it, we first have to explain the idea of the wrong way to pray, which is obviously idolatry, but we'll bring it off into less than idolatry, and then we could speak about the right way to pray. The ancient philosophers, explains Reb Shimshon Pincus, originally they realized that there was a God, but this is when idolatry was rampant. They realized that there was a God, but God is like huge. You can't even begin to understand God. You can't even begin to comprehend God. So they were like, God is so far away. The only way that we could get to God is if we put like a middleman. We have to put a middleman. You think about it this way: a giant cannot crawl through a anthole. As strong as a giant is, it's going to have to break it, it's going to do something. As powerful as someone is, there's a limit to whatever they could do. It says if God is so great and we're so low, there's a very big disconnect going on over here. We need that middleman going in between over there. And the example they used to explain is think about the difference between animal and man. Animal and man, they're worlds apart. But even still, they're not even close to what the difference between man and God. But they're still worlds apart. Now, can animal and man, can they interact? Can they talk? Can they converse? They don't. There's no conversation that they're able to do. They're not able to speak with that. So too, just like man and animal cannot converse, so too man and God cannot converse. There needs to be an intermediary. This is how the ancient philosophers, the ancient secular philosophers used to think. The idea is that you could always look at things at two different angles. You could look at something as being so great that it can't be lowered, or his greatness is that he could be lowered. Meaning that you can look at God as so great, he's so far apart, there's no way we can reach him. That's one way to look at it. The other way to look at it is God is so great, God could be so great and could be over here at the same point in time. It depends on the lens that you're looking to see and how you understand reality. And this, by the way, is true for everything. Everything in life, it depends on your lenses that you're looking into. There are two people that have the same exact scenario. One is happy, one is depressed. Now, it's not because the scenario changed, not because life wasn't fair for them, it's not because something was difficult for them. It all depends on the lens that you're looking at. And if there's one of the main things that Judaism teaches us, it teaches you how to think. That's what the whole idea of learning Torah. Constantly learning, you learn how to think. You learn how to put things in perspective. You learn things, and I believe this is why you have many Jews that are very, very successful. Because a problem is brought to a Jew, it doesn't just, deal with it and let's figure it out. A Jew is taught since they were very, very young. The Gemara, what's Gemara? You have to dissect every single angle. So when you're dealing with a problem, you're dissecting every single angle. You're looking at it from a different perspective. You're looking at it from a different lens. Everything in life can be looked at a positive and a negative. It all depends on you. At the end of the day, you should know it's not going to make a difference, your outcome. Meaning that if the bad thing happened, the bad thing happened. The difference is how you're going to deal with it. So by you being very grouchy upon it, it's not going to change the outcome. By you being very happy about it, it's also not going to change per se the outcome. But what is it going to change? It's going to change your own reality. The way that you're going to perceive reality. Think of this idea of somebody holding a grudge. Somebody who holds a grudge does nothing to the like you see who hates somebody with like a deep-seated, you want that person to fall down 12 flights of stairs onto sharp nails and glass, and then to be lit on fire by gasoline, and then to be rolled over in mud, and then kicked by pigs, and then to be trampled by horses, and then to be fed to the cows. I might have this prepared, I don't know. But you let's say you have a deep-seated, like a really deep-seated hatred for somebody. The fact that you're dreaming about his demise or her demise, does that do anything to her? She's whistling down the street, walking, nothing, and you're like, oh, if I have the power of God in me, I will, if I had the staff of something, you think of all the bad things you do. All that's happening right now is that your blood pressure is rising, you're getting stressed out, and the other person is just swinging, whistling down the road. Nothing is changing to that person. Your attitude doesn't change that person. Your attitude only changes you. So it all depends on the outlook that you look in your life. There's two ways to look at it. The secular people, the world used to look at God in an outlook that God is so great, God can't interact with us. Jewish perspective is like, what are you talking about? Just the opposite. God is so great that God could interact with us. You're looking at it from the wrong lens. What is the proof of this? Look at Shlomo HaMelech. Shlomo HaMelech is the proof that you could converse between animal and man. Shlomo HaMelech knew the language of the animals. The idea is that when you think of a great person, if there is something that this great person can lower themselves to, that means that great person is limited. You think about a good leader, a good boss, you could say. Even a leader is a better example. A good leader is somebody who is able to know every problem of every soldier in the field. Everybody. They know how to, let's say you know what a good boss is? They walk in, it can be a huge, huge corporation. But a good boss sees, the security guard in the front and says, hey, how's it going? How's your kids? How's everything? That's a good leader. That's a good boss. Somebody that could take, bring himself down to everybody's level and be able to relate to that person's level. Greatness doesn't mean that you have 7,000 employees and you could delegate, 4,000 things. The idea is that you're able to bring yourself down. the idol worshippers used to believe, and they still do, that in order to get in contact with God, because God is so great, God is so far, you need to have this intermediary. And Judaism says no, just the opposite. God is so near to the extent that how close is God? That let's say somebody buys a pair of socks, and the socks doesn't match exactly what they wanted to buy, and there's a little bit of pain that you feel, in that. Like, I wish I would have bought a different pair of socks. And it's socks. Like, what is socks? Even that tiny little bit of pain, that is felt by God. That is how close God is, as opposed to how you understand it's a world of a difference. It's not like, okay, missed it by like, a little bit. You're talking about two different worlds. At one perspective, the idolatry, it's all the way over there. We cannot comprehend God. God does not deal with us. God is so far away. In Judaism, God is so close that it bothers God everything that hurts you more than it hurts you. That's how close God is to the Jewish people. God is to the people. The Sefer HaKarim brings down that let's say a person believes this idea of prayer. He believes everything that I just said. He knows that the idolatry part is wrong, but the right, the Jewish part is right. And then he knows that God hears your prayer, God listens to the prayer. But sometimes, let's say he mistakes because of his sins, he cannot stand. He's not fit to stand in front of God in front of prayer. And I've had this conversation with many people, like, because of the bad things that I did, I can't sit in front of God. I can't pray to God. And the Sefer HaKarim says, you realize that if you're dealing with sins and merit, then even if you be as great as Moshe Rabbeinu, as righteous as Moshe Rabbeinu, you still will not be fitting to stand in front of God. He says it's not because of your sins and merits. You think that makes a difference? That doesn't make a difference. God wants to hear your prayers. It doesn't matter how far you're fallen, because guess what? If God has a limit, that means that God is limited by what He's doing. People go and they do something bad. They're like, okay, I can't pray, I can't do anything. What are you talking about? What does one thing have to do with another? He says, beforehand you were a righteous person and you were fitting to sit in front of God. All of a sudden now you did something wrong and now you're not fit. What makes you think you were so righteous beforehand? You weren't righteous beforehand. You weren't fitting now. The difference is that God wants to hear you speak. God wants to hear you pray. God wants you to converse with Him, regardless of your background, regardless of where you're standing. The proof of this, says Rav Shimshon Pincus, is from Menashe. The King Menashe in Ruth Rabbah brings down that, if anybody knows about Menashe, he was a very wicked man, brought the idol worship into the temple, did very, very bad things, and he was captured by the king of Ashur, and they placed him in this copper pot. Just picture this. Placed him in a copper pot, and they lit a fire under the copper pot. Just picture of that. This was an actual torture device, that what they would do is that they would put somebody, it looked like, I've actually seen a replica of it. It was like a calf. It looks like a cow, and it was hollow, and they put somebody inside this like iron copper type of cow, and they lit a fire under it, and this person was stuck inside. You know what that means? That's like burning very slowly alive. That's what you have to, that your body gets singed. And Menashe was, he was caught in that, and he started calling out to every single idol. And obviously no one prayed because they're all fake. There's nothing to, no one was able to save him. Until finally he goes and says, you know what? Let me pray to God. Let me pray to the God of, God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Let me pray to them. Let's see what happens. If He saves me, then fine. If not, then I see He's just the same as everybody else. So he goes and he prays in front of God. This King Menashe goes and prays in front of God. Now the angels hear this prayer. They quickly want to stop the prayer. Be like, what are you kidding me? This is not going up there. And God says, no. He says, what are you doing? He's praying. He's praying, I'm going to listen to him. And to the extent that the angels, the Midrash brings down, the angels wanted to block it. God dug under where the angels block in order to accept the prayer. Now, what was the whole idea behind this? Menashe was saying, listen, it says God is unlimited, meaning that it doesn't matter how far I've fallen, I could still pray. Because if I've fallen so low that I cannot pray to God, that means that there's a limit to how far God's mercy is. And there's no limit to how far God's mercy is. So no matter how far you have fallen, how far you have gone, you still have the ability to pray. You still have the ability to converse with God. Hashem hears the prayer of every single person. There's no limit to how far His mercy is. So, You got saved, right? Yeah. Well, yeah, ultimately. Yeah, the idea over here is with idolatry is we have to put some things in perspective. Number one, idolatry is known as a very, 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 very big sin against Judaism. Now, why is it such a big deal? Even more so, you would think somebody chisels something out of wood, and then he says, you created me. And he goes and he starts praying to this piece of it. The guy needs psychiatric help. It's sin. Okay, fine, it's a sin, but the guy, There's something going on over there. He just built something, and now he's praying to it. Idolatry, it's the second commandment of the 10 commandments. Why is it such a big deal? It's such a big thing. And furthermore, why do we speak about it? The Torah speaks about it if it's real. Lo yeh lecha elokim acharim. It says the pasuk in Shemot that you're not allowed to have any other gods in front of you. Elokim. Why are we using the word elokim? What does it mean? Is this real or is this fake? Why are we using idolatry as a real term? We have to understand the concept of idolatry in order to understand how not to pray. Now, when you have an adult that goes down the street and driving a car, let's say, and he looks down the road. Now he sees trees, he sees bushes, he sees a woman dragging a stroller. You see people shopping. You see the whole world around you. Now you have a baby sitting in the back seat, strapped in the car seat, looking at the same exact thing. But what does the baby see? I mean, it sees the same thing, but it comprehends it. It's like shapes, images, blue sky, something else. They're both looking at the same thing, but they're comprehending very, very different things. The way that we see when we look at, let's say, at the stars, astrology, let's use that as an example, because people used to worship the stars and the suns and the moon. When we see that, we see the sun, the stars, and the moon. What we see is like what an infant sees when they are looking outside a window. In the olden days, in the ancient days, when an idolatry started, they knew the depth behind these, the astrology. They knew the depth behind what do the stars represent. What do the sun mean? There's power behind it. In fact, the Rambam in Hilchot Yisodei HaTorah brings down that the stars and the heavenly spheres, they're living beings, and they possess knowledge. More knowledge, by the way, than human beings. Less knowledge than angels, but more knowledge than human beings. So these people, they faced a real test. They were like, wait a minute, they're beings.
Stars?
Like stars. They're alive. Yeah, they have knowledge. Crazy, right?
The zodiac signs are real. Stars have knowledge?
Zodiac signs are real. Okay. Of course, the mazal. The idea over here is that they really saw the truth behind it. They saw that there was power over here. There was something over here, but they misrepresented something. There is power in there. It explains Rabbi Kiva Tatz, and I think we explained this before. The idea of looking in the stars and seeing the future, that's like a legit thing. I mean, nowadays we can't do it. People that say they could do it run the other way and don't buy their newspapers. But, in generally, when you have this knowledge is something that did exist at one point. How much we have it now, that's to be debated. But they knew that the way that it worked by looking at the stars and seeing the future is, you can use that example as, let's say somebody knows how to study seeds very well. Apple seeds, orange seeds, all different types of seeds from plants. And you show them, let's say, a handful of seeds from one particular, species, whatever. And they say, this is going to be the round tomatoes. That's what it's going to grow. I'd be like, wow, can you predict the future? I'd be like, no, I just studied it. I know that this seed belongs to that, that type of tomato. I'd be like, no, you're predicting the future. No. I know the what the seeds represent, what they have, the power that they have, and that's what's going to happen. The same idea is what the astrologers used to have, or the astronomers used to have. I keep on confusing those two. Is it astronomers, astrologers? Astronomers.
Astrologers.
Astrology is telling the future? Thank you. So it's astrology. Okay. So was I saying it right the whole time? Yeah. Okay, good. High five. Okay. So now, the astrologers, what they used to do is that they would look into the stars as if they're looking at seeds. They're like, okay, I see this is going to happen. They were just reading what's going to happen in the future because they just knew it. They just knew how it worked. It was all a mathematical formula. The difference is that there was power in that, but the power was manipulated and abused in a very, very negative way. It's an example that Rabbi Chanan Wasserman goes and explains like this. Say somebody has $200 and they want to go to a store and they want to buy a $1,500 laptop. Now, simple mathematics will tell you ain't going to happen. But let's say you're thinking and you say, listen, you go to the guy behind the counter and he says, the guy doesn't work there. The guy doesn't own the store. He says, listen, he says, I know I can't pay for that, but I'll slip you the $200. You put that in your pocket and this laptop fell off the cart or whatever it is, got lost or whatever it is, fell off like that. So, and they would do this type of trade. This type of trade, that represents idolatry. Idolatry has power in it. But what the idolaters use is that they use to manipulate the power to try to bypass, the system. And when they bypassed the system, they got what they wanted, but through a negative way. And you think of it this way. Idolatry focuses on the person who holds the power as opposed to the person who owns the power. Think of it like this. Let's say you have a CEO. And this CEO has 50,000 employees. And there are, let's say, 1,000 directors. Obviously there's a hierarchy of needs. And there's managers and there's supervisors. And then there's one little salesperson, like all the way at the very, very bottom. Now, this person the salesperson all the way at the bottom, like the CEO, doesn't know who he is, doesn't know anything about him. Does he care about the CEO? Not really. Who does he care to make happy? His supervisor, his manager, or the CEO? He'd rather make the supervisor happy. So that's the guy who's going to tell him, you can take PTO over here. You can't take PTO over here. You're going to get a bonus over here. You're not going to get a bonus over here. The CEO is so far advanced, it's not going to make a difference, if he makes the CEO happy. I mean, we're not talking about a crazy situation where he's going to make the CEO happy and then he's going to make him run his company. We know how all Jews think, right? But in general, right, you're thinking you're going to go and you're going to make it what? You're going to try to make the person directly above you happy in order to get what you want. The wielder of power. The idolaters, we're not looking at the source of the power, which is God. They're looking, who has the power right now? And if I could go and appease that power, who has that power right now, and I can get what I want, I'm good. I don't need anything anymore. The idea over here is that they were looking for a shortcut to get out of things. And the truth is that they were able to. If they knew what they were doing, they were able to get around certain things. When you're looking at this in respect to prayer, there's a Mishnah in Pirkei Avot that says that Kol ahava she'itloya b'davar if somebody goes and has a love that is based off something, that is based off of anything that's superficial, once that whatever objective goes away, the love goes away. So think of it like this. Think of this scenario. So a man marries a woman based only because of her looks. Only because of her looks and nothing else. The second that her looks goes, the love is going to go also, because the foundation of everything was all based on the love. So a love that is based on something, once that something goes, the love goes. Love that's not based on anything, once anything goes, it doesn't matter. It's not based on anything. The love is going to stay there forever. The idea of praying, if you're going and you're praying to God to get something, and that's all you're doing, that means that your relationship with God is based off something. And that's why you have some people, let me try to explain this. Yeah, you have some people that they will, let's say, become more religious in order to get something. And then they don't get something, so they don't become any more religious. I'm like, you are never religious to begin with. I mean, yeah, you practice some things.
What about like mitoch shalosh ma'abalishma?
There is, of course. There's the idea mitoch shalosh ma'abalishma 100%. That you should do things even from the wrong perspective. But if somebody goes and is solely intent of, let's say, becoming religious, and I've had the people, they've tried to get married, they tried it, it's very difficult, they tried chatchanin, they tried dieting online, they tried everything, didn't work, let's try God a little bit, right? So they try God a little bit, God doesn't work out, so they go back to something else, which means is that when they were becoming religious, it was based off something. Should they not do it? Of course they should still do it, because hopefully we're assuming that you're going to go on, you're going to continue it. If you're doing partially truthful, eventually it's going to turn lishma, but it's going to turn for the right sake. But the foundation of it was based off falsehood. It was based off something that wasn't going to last to begin with. The idolaters, when they went and they did something to get something. That's the only reason why they wanted to do it is to get something. And they got something. And that's why the Torah speaks of idolatry as real. It is real. I mean, it's fake, but it's real. It's very fake, but it has real powers into it. You get what I'm saying? Okay. No, maybe, sometimes, on Tuesdays. What? Some things, yeah. The idolaters had power. They had power back then. You could say it was black magic. You say something like that. There was some power in it. There was a reason why people, now the Chachamim they went and they removed the desire for idolatry. There wasn't a desire for idolatry that we can't even begin to understand. But the difference between idolatry, and this is very important, and this will summarize what we just spoke about for the past 5 minutes. The difference between idolatry and serving God is idolatry is I'm serving me. I am going to do something as long as I could get something from it. So idolatry means I could get it this way, I'll do it this way. It's a shortcut, no problem. Because ultimately there's one thing that matters in this world, and that's me. And as long as I can get it, I don't care how I get it, that's how I'm going to get it. Idolatry is serving me. Serving God is serving God, without me involved in it. Is there going to be a ripple effect of me positive things happening? Yeah, of course. But that's not the reason why I'm here. I'm here because I'm serving God. The difference is where your where your, I guess you could say where your perspective is. You could look at it. Reb Simcha Wasserman goes and explains that the idolaters, they put themselves over their idol. You look at Paro. Paro in Bereshit chapter 41 verse 1. It says, Hine omet ala ya'or. In his dream, he was standing over the Nile River, and we know the Nile River was a god. It was an idol. They used to worship to the. So in Paro's dream, he was standing over the Nile. Yaakov Avinu also had a dream. In Yaakov, in Genesis chapter 28 verse 12 and verse 13, it says, V'hinei Hashem nitzav alav, and God is standing over Yaakov. What is the difference over here? In the Nile, Paro was standing over his God. Yaakov, God was standing over him. There's a difference of where idolaters put God and where the Jewish perspective put God. Idolaters put God, I'm above you, and you are here to serve me. And as long as I can get what I want, then we're good. Otherwise, we're not. God, the way that the Judaism works, the way it is, no. God is above us, and we are below. And the way that we serve God is we're serving God going up, not going down. This we can begin to understand. And if you're a little bit unclear about what's happening, it's going to clarify. Just bear with me a little bit more. It's going to clarify in a little bit. The Gemara in Shabbat, page 105, says like this. It says that somebody who loses his temper, it says if he worshipped avodah zarah. Now we can begin to understand this concept. We can begin to understand this idea of avodah zarah and idol worship. I'm sorry, avodah zarah in losing temper. What happens when someone loses their temper? Meaning that you offended me. There's something that should have happened to me. I said this was supposed to happen. There's something in me that got offended. That's why I get angry. Because you did something wrong to me. Meaning the emphasis is me. It's all about me. Just like idolatry. Idolatry, it's all about me. Anger is all about me. Says the Gemara, just like idolatry is all about me, and that's serving idols, so too anger, since it's all about you, it's also serving your idols. There was once a story about the Vishnitzer Rebbe that, a lot of people before Pesach, they would go to the matzah factories and they would make their own matzahs. Because, you have to be very, very meticulous on matzah and chametz and all these things. People are very, very meticulous, and they actually go and they bake it before Pesach. So, there was this entourage of people that went into to bake before Pesach, and everybody's on the nerves, not even a little bit of water, not even this, very, very meticulous in everything that they do. There was one guy that was sitting over there, and he was doing his matzot, and somebody else who was also working with him messed up a little bit, and he started getting so angry, and he says, "How are you doing this? You're making everything chametz, everything's destroyed, everything's ruined, now everything's not kosher," and he's going on and on. So the Rebbe goes over to him and he says, "What's going on over here?" He says, "Why are you getting so upset?" He says, "Rebbe, don't you know?" He says, as if he's telling the rabbi, he says, "Don't you know, even a little bit of chametz is forbidden on Pesach." So the rabbi responds to him, he says, a little bit of anger is worse than a little bit of chametz. He says, because people don't put things in perspective. We put things in the way that we want to see it. You know what anger is? Anger has the ability to destroy relationship. It has the ability to destroy lives. You don't think clearly. It's worshiping yourself is when you get angry. I'm not saying it's easy to withstand and withhold anger, but you have to understand the foundations of it and where it stands. It's based off the same idea, the same ideology as idolatry. It's the same concept that you're going and it's all about me and it's nobody else matters. Nobody else is important other than me. The idea when you're going and you want to have a real relationship with God, a real relationship with God is not contingent on our needs. A real relationship with God has nothing to do. The idea is that if, let's say, you pray and you don't get something and you stop praying, that was a prayer, that was a relationship that was based off that was a partnership. Hey, God, okay, listen, I have to pray. I'm sorry, I'll pray. I'll do this thing. Just, here's my checklist and I need this stuff. That's not a relationship. That's a partnership. You do this, you get this. That's not what Judaism is. That's not what true prayer is. That's the essence of idolatry. And of course, it's not idolatry if you go to God and just ask for things, and then once you don't get it, you stop praying. Obviously, that's not idolatry. But the essence of it is the same foundation as idolatry. And by the way, you should know that it's not a problem. You should ask God for everything that you want and anything that you want. You should ask for it. But you have to realize, you have to understand the concept of people that stop, they say, okay, listen, God doesn't want to answer me. How do you know? In fact, I'll share with you the story. There was a kid by the name of Jerry. This Jerry, he had a very hard time. He lived in a very upscale Hollywood, California neighborhood. And he had a very, very hard life, as many of the people that live over there do in this type of financial situation. And that's sarcastic, by the way. And the hardship in his life was he had two sisters, and he was always to blame. He had two twin sisters, and everything that happened wrong, it's always Jerry's fault. Everybody blames Jerry. And he's sitting over there, and every time that they do something wrong, they blame him, and he gets punished. And one time he's, bemoaning his ill fate in his king-size bed over there, in his duplex room over there. And he's sitting over there, and he's like, God, he's like, what's going to be? He's like, how am I going to solve my problem over here? He says, how am I going to fix this? He says, it's not fair. It's always the girls against me, and they are always winning. So he's thinking, he says, you know what? He says, the only way that I could win is I have to get somebody else on my side. He says, I need another brother. He says, there were three children in the family. There were two girls and one boy. He says, if I get another boy on my side, then it's 2 against 2. Then we're going to have a fair fight, and then we'll see who wins. So he goes and he starts speaking to God. He starts praying to God. He says, God, he says, this is Jerry. I know you could hear me. And he says, listen, he says, I know I haven't been a good Jew. Didn't even know what a good Jew is. The family went to synagogue, Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur on good years, and that's about it. He says, but if you give me this, if you give me another brother, I promise you, God, he says, I, Jerry, promise you that I will be the best Jew that I can be. So he goes and he feels satisfied with his prayer, and he says, okay. He says, it's good. 10-year-old finishes prayer, and he says, that's it. Then he goes and he forgets about it. And then he remembers, and he's like, wait a minute. He says, how am I going to know, if let's say I do get another brother, how am I going to know that God answered me because of my prayer? Maybe it just happened. He says, so he had a postscript. He's like, God, it's me again. This is a little extension on my, plea bargain over here. He says, listen, you're going to have to give me a sign that I know it was from my prayer that you listened to me. He says, the sign is that let the baby be born on my birthday. If I have a baby brother born on my birthday, I know it's from my prayer, and then I'm going to be the best Jew. Fine. He goes and, he's 10 years old. The next day he forgets about it. He's playing his stuff, and he goes on in life as usual. A few months go by, and he's sitting with his parents on a train. And they're sitting on this train, and they, he looks over at his father, and his father's whispering over to the mother. The mother is smiling and nodding, and she whispers something back to him, and he's smiling and nodding. So he goes over to Jerry sitting over there next to his two sisters, and the father goes and says, children, we would like to share some good news with you. And so they all stop, they listen, and says, listen, your mommy is expecting another baby. And the girls are jumping in joy, and suddenly Jerry is sitting over there, and he's like, he's like a small, creepy smile goes all over his face, and he's like, interesting. He's like, okay. And all of a sudden he remembers his deal, and they see that he's like, smiling and quiet. He's like, Jerry, are you okay? And he's like, yeah, I'm fine. He's like, are you sure? You're taking this a bit odd. He's like, listen. He says, it's going to be a boy, and it's going to be born on my birthday. And he's like, what are you talking about, Jerry? He says, this is and they're like, listen. Jerry tells his parents, listen, I made a deal with God, and that God is going to give me another baby brother, and as a sign, it's going to be born on my birthday. So, there's very secular people that they're dealing with. They were like, listen, God loves you. They couldn't, start explaining about God and Judaism, but they couldn't discredit him either because just so happened to be that the due date just so happened to be around the birthday as well. So they were like, okay, fine. So they, every time they spoke about the baby in front of Jerry, it was always a he. They always pretended to be he, but they didn't know the gender of the baby, and they continued going as it was. It came to the 9th month. The mother's in the 9th month, and all of a sudden the mother gets a call from the doctor, and the gynecologist goes and says, listen, he says, I am going to be traveling out of the country, when your due date. He says, but 2 days before your due date, he says, if you want, he says, we can induce the baby and I could deliver it, and I could do the delivery, or you could just get the other doctor on call. It's up to you. He says, but I'm not going to be over here. So they were thinking back and forth. They said, you know what? Let's just, we'll induce it. She says, I rather get, it go with you, someone I'm comfortable with, and we'll do the early labor. And they went to the early labor, and Mazal Tov, it turns out it's a healthy baby boy. And Jerry is ecstatic. He's so happy. And now he's thinking, he says, wait a minute. He says, but it was born a few days before his birthday. His birthday was April. It was born on April 4th. And he says this was a few days before his birthday. He says, but then he was thinking, he's being an honest Jew. He says, listen, my mother was induced. He says if she wouldn't have been induced, she probably would have been born on the same day of my birthday, the baby boy. And he says, you know what? And I have to hold up to my promise. So he made the thing. He says, God kept his end of the deal. I'm going to keep my end of the deal. The only problem is, he's almost 11 years old. He says, what is a secular, kid in Hollywood going to know about being a better Jew? He didn't know anything about it. So this always kept in the back of his mind. And he came to his bar mitzvah age, and in that particular area of town, when these affluent Hollywood families, when they had a bar mitzvah, they had a bar mitzvah. It wasn't, you call it a party, but they had a real party. But a lot of the boys, they went and they prepared learning from the Torah. They learned a little bit basic stuff, and then they had a big bash, and they would invite Justin Bieber and whatnot into their amazing spiritual heightened celebration. In any case, they go and this Jerry said, listen, he goes to his dad. He says, Dad and Mom, listen. He says, I also want to have a bar mitzvah. All my friends are having bar mitzvah. I also want to have one. So this is fine. They booked the hall, they booked the caterer, and then they booked the rabbi also to teach him some of the stuff that he needs to learn for a bar mitzvah. And he went and he started learning, and the rabbi it was a very smart rabbi, and he said, listen, he says, I'll teach you, no problem, but I have a few requirements. He says, these kids, they're never learning anything about Judaism. They're in public school, they're doing their boarding schools, whatever it is. He says, if you want to go with me, no problem. He gets tested. You're going to learn a few books about Judaism, then you get tested, and then I can begin to teach you about the Haftorah and all, the Torah, reading the Torah. And that's what happened. And Jerry started reading these books, and it just sank in. He just loved it. He's like, as a 13-year-old, he was able to just breathe this all in, and he's like, this is so beautiful. This is so unbelievable. This is so amazing. And, came his bar mitzvah and went his bar mitzvah, but he kept on going to the rabbi. Every Thursday night, he would take his bike, and he would travel to the rabbi, and he kept on going, kept on studying with the rabbi. To the extent that eventually he began to practice what he learned. And he began keeping Shabbat. He began putting on tefillin. He began walking 5 miles every day just to walk to shul on Shabbat. So, the rabbi started wondering, religious people wasn't a very common thing in his congregation, if you could understand the congregation that he's dealing with. And he says, what's got it with this kid? This 13-year-old kid is not only after that, but he's still sticking up to it, and he's going furthermore in it. So one time he goes over to to Jerry, and he says, Jerry, he says, what's up with you? He says, what's going on? He says, how is it that all your friends, they came and they went, and you're staying over here and you're continuing learning the Torah? So Jerry goes and he says, he brings down the whole story. He says, listen, I made a deal with God, and I have to keep my end of the deal. And he brings down the whole story, his brother, his sisters, he made this whole deal, and the birthday. So the rabbi's listening, and he says, okay, he says, interesting. He says, question though. He says, God doesn't do half on his promises. He says, when is your birthday? So he says, April 6, 1959. And he says, oh, okay. He says, and when was the baby born? He says, April 4th. And he says, okay, but it says that's the secular date. What's the Hebrew date? And Jerry's like, what's the difference? Hebrew and he didn't even realize what's the difference. He says, of course there's a difference in Hebrew and secular date. You think if God is going to make someone born on your birthday, he's going to do it on the secular date? What's a secular date? It means nothing. He says, you got to check the Hebrew date. The rabbi takes out this old binder, has like a 50-year-old calendar. He opens up to April 6, 1959. He looks to see what day is it of the Hebrew calendar. It's the second day of Nisan. He says, what day was your baby brother born? He says, April 4th, 1970. Turns over to 1970, April 4th. Guess what day it is? Second day of Nisan. He says, God didn't change on his promise. God gave you exactly what exactly what you requested. Today, Jerry turned into Rabbi Shmuel Gordon. Rabbi Shmuel Gordon, he turned into a rabbi, and now he travels far and wide to go and teach, teach Judaism to the unaffiliated. You have people that they go and they have a prayer, and they think they don't get answered, or they think they almost got answered. He says, how do you know? Who are you to judge where you don't get answered? How do you know that you didn't get answered? Many times we think we don't get answered, but we do get answered. I had a conversation with somebody last Shabbat, and I was explaining like this. Let's say somebody goes and prays for money, and he says, you know what, I didn't get the money. Says, but wait a minute, did you get everything that you need? Are you lacking something? He says, no, I'm not lacking anything, but I didn't get what I wanted. He says, how do you? So in his mind, he was praying for $7 billion. He didn't get $7 billion, but he got all his money expenses were covered. So when we're looking at a prayer and we think we didn't get answered, how do you know you didn't get answered? Maybe you did get answered. Are you looking at it from the right lens? Look at this story about Jerry. Jerry thought that, okay, he got answered very close. No. He got answered exactly. We have to put on the right glass. When you want to look at signs, there's two ways to look at it. You could see a sign and say, oh, it's all, just how it so happened to be, just, by accident. Or you could look at a sign and you could see that it's exactly from what God intended it to happen. You have, I asked an atheist once. I asked an atheist, I asked him, did a miracle ever happen to you? You know what he told me? He says, no. I said, that's a very sad reality. He says, everybody in life, everybody sitting over here can think of something miraculous that happened to them. Again, you might not have been falling from the sky and all of a sudden, a hand just like swifted you up over there and lifted you up and, neatly put you down on the ground. But in a miraculous state, there's something that happened in your life. There's something that you could say like, you know what? God, thank you. Like you are watching me. For somebody not to realize that nothing ever miraculous happened in their life, that's not because nothing miraculous happened in their life. That means because they're not looking. They're not opening their eyes. They're not looking with the right perspective. The idea of prayer is when you're praying for something, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to get exactly the way that you ask for it. It's going to come, but a different way. But if you're praying only to get something and you don't get it, guess what? That is the wrong way for prayer. That is a prayer, that is the ideology of idolatry. That is what it's all about me. I'm here for me and no one else. So until now, we were just discussing most of the time really discussing the idea of how not to do it. Now let's try to discuss how to pray. What is the correct way to pray? That's the idea of idolatry. So far, so good? Yeah, maybe a little bit? Okay, good. Rab Shimshon Pincus goes and says like this. It says, when you are dealing with prayer, the Gemara in Tanit says that prayer is known as avodah. Avodah is, when you look at avodah, there is two ways to that you could translate avodah. Either based off a pasuk in Shemot chapter 1 verse 14, and they embitter their lives with hard work. Is talking about the Egyptians when they made the Jewish people work very hard. What is avodah referring to over here? It's referring to physical labor, physical difficult labor. So it could be working, like the avodah is working, or it could be as in the Bamidbar in Numbers chapter 4 verse 47. It's a service for the On Moed, service for the Mishkan, service for, let's say, a korbanot. It's instead of work, it's servitude, to be able to serve God. The Gemara in Yoma, page 42a, says, the slaughtering of the korban is not the avodah. When you're going, the work of the kohen doesn't have to be, the kohen doesn't have to slaughter the animal. The kohen has to sprinkle the blood. The blood part is the avodah. The slaughtering is not. Even though the slaughtering is a lot more difficult, it's a lot more tedious than the actual sprinkling of the blood. Now, why is that? Because one of the foundations, and one of the things of prayer, of avodah, is to nullify your own importance. This is the foundation. This is something we're really going to try to focus on, the self-nullification. The idea that we see this best over here is by bowing down. What happens when someone bows down? When the difference, let's say, between a lion and a human is tremendous in the physical sense and also tremendous in the intellectual sense. Like, a human cannot beat a lion just based off physical strength. But a human could beat and capture a lion based off their intellect. They're able to go and figure out a way to capture him, and that's how they're able to beat it. When you go and you bow down, prostrate yourself, like literally face down on the floor, you're putting your feet and your head at the same level. Meaning that the difference between my feet and my head and God are the same. Like, it doesn't matter that I'm I'm smarter than an animal. It doesn't matter. I'm self-nullification. I am nothing like the level of my feet, and that no matter how smart I am, I'm still the level of my feet. That's how you nullify yourself in front of God. That's the idea of bowing down, the self-nullification of before God. Says Reb Shimshon Pincus, the greatest drawback for prayer, the greatest drawback for avodah, is failing to self-nullify, is failing to do this. You have to realize that the idea of self-nullification is also the idea that everything comes from God. Everything is from God. To explain this, there is a machloket regarding the obligation to pray with the Ramban and Ramban, Maimonides and Nachmanides. Rambam says that there is a Torah-obligated mitzvah to pray every single day. The Ramban says, no, the Torah-obligated mitzvah is only to pray when you're in trouble. The rabbinic mitzvah is to pray every single day. Now, what is the difference over here? The difference over here is, let's say somebody prayed already, and then they came into trouble. Let's say they prayed, and then, God forbid, their child fell down the stairs. So now they're in a trouble situation. So according to the Rambam, Maimonides, they fulfilled their obligation of prayer. They prayed already. But according to the Ramban, Nachmanides, he says, no, now they have a Torah obligation to pray. Now that they have to pray because that they're troubled. There's something that's troubling them. Obviously, this should not be withheld. Somebody who doesn't fall down, so you don't take out the Elim and say, Shir Lamalo. You take the person to the hospital first. But I'm saying the prayer has to be a very important aspect to it. Medical care should not be delayed because of prayer. But the difference over here is that you realize that when you're in a situation, you are required to pray. To the extent that the Sefer HaChinuch, if I'm not mistaken, says that if you don't pray while you're in trouble, you violated a positive biblical commandment. You had a positive biblical commandment that you have to pray. And if you didn't pray when you're in trouble, why not? Why didn't you do that? You're supposed to. You're required to.
It is a biblical commandment.
According to the Ramban, yeah. If you're in trouble, pray. God, please save me.
Trouble or your deity? Are those two separate things?
No, one is rabbinic and one is biblical. It's a machlok between the Ramban and Ramban. But regardless, you're in a trouble situation, you pray. That's what you're supposed to do. As a Jew, you're in a trouble situation, you pray.
Like a natural reaction?
Not for everybody. Some people have other four-letter words that come out of as a natural reaction. Listen, avodah is also a four-letter word. So the brisker Rav used to go before somebody used to come to him for advice, and let's say would ask for something. It was a lot of serious stuff that he has to deal with over here, and he would pray. He would go and he would start praying because he says this is an obligation. So someone comes to me for advice. He realizes the severity of it, and it's time to pray. The idea is that why are we praying when we're in difficult state? Because realizing everything is God. It's self-nullification. It's nothing to do with us. Everything is God. Everything comes from God. To the extent that Rambam says like this. The Rambam says that how should a person pray? It should start off with a praise, then the person should ask what he needs, and then he should end with a praise. Why do we have to start with a praise and then end with a praise? Why not just ask? He says because in order for a tefillah to be an avodah, in order for a tefillah to be a correct prayer, it has to be something that it comes from self-nullification. You have to realize who you're speaking to. You're speaking to God who gave you everything and who will give you everything. You start off with a praise, and you end off with a praise, realizing that everything is from you. Everything that could happen, everything is from you, and only you can help me. Once you put yourself in that perspective, then you're able to go and you're able to ask. Then you're putting yourself in the right mindset. Many people have a very misunderstanding in kavanah. Kavanah is like the intent. What's a good translation for kavanah? Concentration, intent. I don't know. Probably nothing good. As a good translation for it. But if somebody has good, people think, what's kavanah? You get to something and you concentrate. You just destroy the words. You concentrated. You're like nothing else, which is great. You should do that. But that's not what it says, because that's not kavanah. Greater kavanah does not mean greater concentration. Says greater kavanah means that you increase your awareness of Hashem's infinite greatness, His unlimited abilities. The more that you do that, the greater your kavanah is. Extra kavanah means, he goes like this, and I'm going to quote for you. It says, Hashem, you're so great. Your kindness is literally infinite, and there's nothing that can stand in your way. It says, you control and direct everything. So please, God, heal the sick person. That is kavanah. Kavanah is realizing who you're speaking to, realizing what we just spent the first four principles of God, dealing with, realizing what God is. God is everything. God comes from everything. God gives you everything. God is the source of everything. Once you realize that, then you can have the proper kavanah. Then you have the proper self-nullification, and then you can have the proper awareness of what really God is, and you can really have a true prayer. This is why the standard form of avodah, which by the way, avodah, prayer, the same idea. It was a korbanot. Now we don't have korbanot, so we have the prayers, the three prayers instead. The korbanot, what is a korbanot? It was a slaughtering. What is more self-nullifying than a slaughtering of an animal? The blood that comes out. Was when you're slaughtering an animal for a korban, it's as if you're being on the korban. That's complete and pure and utter self-nullification. That is the sense of everything. But how much of us fail in this concept? How much of us, nobody knows about this for some reason. Like this is such a foreign concept. When we sit and pray, but we're doing it wrong. We're not doing it the right way. Again, it doesn't mean that you shouldn't be doing it the way that you're doing it until now. That's fine. At least you're doing something. But you have to realize the aspect, the true power of prayer. The idea over here is realizing that God is behind everything and anything. Even to the extent, that when people have failures, they usually blame it on God. When people have success, they usually blame it on themselves. It says, I'm a good businessman, what can I tell you? It failed 16,000 businesses, all God. God hated me for but something happened and I fixed myself and now God is out of my way, now I can do business. Like as if you take the failures, you put it on God, you take your success and you put it on you. So the success and the failure both come from God. Both come from God. Where you see this the most? Somebody unfortunately loses their job. People that believe in God, what is the first thing that they say? It's all from God. God has a bigger plan. God has a better, something bigger and better for me. And rightfully so. That's the right attitude to have. But what happens if that same person gets a bonus? Double their salary. Do they say, God has a greater plan for me, I must give more charity? What happens when all of a sudden they get a bonus? When they lose their job, all of a sudden it's all because God has a greater plan. When they gain, more money, is God also have a plan? Do they also give more charity? Do they spend more time learning? What happens with that? And the more that you contemplate on this, the more that you can see the separation that we have over here. But in essence, the success and the failures all come from God. And in fact, Rav Noach Weinberg used to say that if you think that you could succeed in something, then you already failed. Because who says that you're going to succeed? He says the only way that you're going to be able to succeed in something is to realize that it's all from God. And if God wants you to succeed, then you succeed. If God doesn't want you to succeed, then you don't succeed. Some people go and they say, there's no way that I'm going to be able to accomplish this. He says, who gave you the right to say that? Did you succeed in anything in your life? Everything was from God. Everything that you succeeded in God. You have one thing that you have to think about. What am I supposed to do? What is the right thing to do? If this is the right thing to do, so I'm doing it. If I'm going to succeed or fail, that's up to God. But I have to do the right thing. That is your focus in your life. You have to realize that everything is in God's hand. Everything is in God's hand. When you have this concept, then your prayer is a different prayer. Your prayer, when you're going into prayer, you're not going into a prayer saying, okay, God, please help me this, please. It's completely different aspect of it. It's going in from a completely different angle. And not only that, what happens if you're going to go and knowing that everything is from God, and you give the prayer, knowing that God hears you, God is close to you. He says, the idea of you failing after that prayer, of saying, okay, God did listen to that prayer, is very slim. He says, because you just said that God has everything. If God has everything, then God did this to you. If God did this to you, then there's a reason. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't stop praying. You understand the thought process? Are you guys with me in that? Okay. You don't have to nod your head just because I asked you the question. You can say no. Well, the Torah goes and describes prayer like this. He says that a person who focuses his heart and thoughts, and his intentions are purified while he's praying, he gets like the ancient pious men, the ancient men who reached the level of transcending physicality to the level close to the level of prophecy. So I'm referring to prayer. When you're doing prayer the right way, you get into the close level of prophecy. Why is the Torah going and explaining that it's a close to the level of ancient prophecy? Because what is prophecy? Prophecy is a close connection to God. So close that you can hear God speak. That is what prayer is. Prayer is you're getting a close connection to God. Says Reb Shimshon Pincus, says that Shabbos is a Jew's heart. Shabbat is the heart of a Jew. Emunah is a Jew's mind. Tefillah, prayer, is the Jewish blood, the Jew blood. The blood is constantly flowing throughout your entire body. That's why you realize everything in Jews, it's always circled around prayer. Like even blessings. We're making blessings before, we're making blessings after, we're praying to God and all. It's the blood. The blood is something that is constantly has to be in every part of the body every single second. If not, the thing starts dying. The second that you have blood flow that ceases to deliver to a certain part of your body starts shutting down in that particular area. Prayer needs to constantly work just like the blood. It has to be constantly going throughout your entire body. So let's try to give this just a clear recap of what we discussed here. We started off with saying that the difference between idolatry and prayer. What's the difference between idolatry and prayer? Idolatry, the focus is only about me. Only about me. True prayer is not focused only about me. It's focused about God. It's focused about the greater picture. But idolatry, it's all about me and starts with me and ends with me. And everything has to do with me. If I can get what I want, then good. Everything else, it doesn't matter. When people go and they pray just based off me, then again, it's not idolatry, but it's the sense that you're messing up. That's not the true prayer. It's not the true essence of prayer. The true essence of prayer is to realize who you're dealing with. To realize that you're sitting in front of God. God who created everything, yesh me'ayin, everything from nothing. God who is one, who is from the good and from the bad. God who doesn't have any physical body. God who is eternity. God who is so close to you that doesn't need an intermediary. God that everything that good that happened in your life happened because of that. And everything bad happened also because of God, because God loves you and cares about you, and there's a reason for that. Everything happened because of God. And everything is ultimately from God. When you realize that, then you can begin praying in a different angle. There's a self-nullification. There's just like the bowing, the prostrating, and just like the shechting that you're slaughtering. You're saying, I'm nothing, I'm not, everything is from you. You're bringing yourself to a level that you're able to go and nullify yourself in front of God, realizing that everything is from God. Once you do that, your prayer is a whole different ballgame. It's a whole different ballgame. To the extent that you'll never have the idea, the thought that maybe you didn't get answered, because it doesn't matter. I'm praying to God. It's not about me. It's about God. And of course we want to get answered. Of course we want to hear our prayers getting answered. And B'ezras Hashem, may we all hear our prayers getting answered exactly the way that we want to see them. And may we all have tremendous amount of merit in our prayers that we'll be able to help not only ourselves, but also every single other Jew around us. And we should be praying for everybody else. And you should know, this is something important that I cannot, and I have to say this when you speak about prayer. If you really want to get answered about something, if you really have something that you really want, pray for somebody else who has the same exact issue. Once you pray for somebody who has the same exact issue, that puts it also on such a higher level that your prayer, it says, call somebody who goes and prays for his friend, he gets answered first, or she gets answered first. So the essence of prayer is a very, very important one, and we'll see how this continues into the next week when we're going to speak about prophecy, how it's also correlated to it. Any questions? Okay, good. Thank you. Let's say you really want your friend to be answered first?
Yeah.
that means you're doing it right. Because if you're like, okay, God, listen, there was a trick over here, so please make my friend get married first. I also want to get married, and I also want to have a successful husband. I also want to have, so if you really, then you're doing it right. If you really want to get your friend answer for that, then it should be that way.
For 3 friends to get married first, and all 3 of them are married.
Oh, Baruch Hashem, say have a good thing. Maybe they've been praying for you. Yeah. You should know, by the way, that when you're dealing with this, there's no people think okay, you go 40 days to the kotel, everything that you'll pray will come true. There's a lot of other factors that come into play, into perspective over here. There's a lot of other factors that are important to understand over here. But what we're saying, this is a skulad, meaning that this is you make your prayer. Let's say you have a meter of the power of the prayer. So you have let's say a power prayer of 10. All of a sudden you pray for somebody else that brings a power of 50. So does it mean that you're going to get it answered? No, but you have a stronger power of it. You have a stronger possibility of it. Make sense? I think so too. Right. So excellent question. The question is like this. The question is idolatry. I mentioned that it's all based off me, worship of me and working that. But Judaism is also like that, because every mitzvah that you do, you're doing it that you should get, because you're getting closer to God, you're getting the reward, you're getting, it's bringing you something closer. However, while that's true, that is not the ultimate purpose of Judaism. The highest level of Judaism is not to serve God for reward. It's to serve God that you don't get reward. And because of that, I'll share with you something that I wasn't going to share yet. There are certain things that if you don't believe in it, you lose your share in the world to come in these 13 principles of faith. Except for the idea of reward and punishment. Why not reward and punishment? Because the ultimate idea of doing something, you should not be doing it for reward. You should be doing it because God told you to do it. Not because of anything else that comes out of it. Granted, you will get something out of it. There will be reward that comes out of it, but that should not be your motivational force to do it. That's a very high level. It's not easy for everybody. Sometimes it's very difficult. But the idea of Judaism is not for the reward. Granted, you will get the reward. You will get the benefit that comes out of it, but the source of it is not for that. Ultimately, put it this way. Ultimately, you're going to get benefit from things. There's no way of not getting around not getting benefit. You're going to get benefit. You're going to go, let's say, learn Torah. You're going to enjoy it. You're benefiting from it. You're going to benefit it. The point is not to not benefit from it. Don't get me wrong. It's not like you're not supposed to benefit from it. The point is, what is your origin reason for doing something? If your origin reason for doing something is for me, then you're doing it wrong. If your origin reason is to doing it for God, and then you're going to get a benefit from it, that's 2 different worlds. Your viewpoint, your starting point is not me. Your starting point is God. Ultimately, you're going to get to this point that it's going to be me, but that is not where you're starting from. You understand the difference?
For God, but you can still have pleasure.
Of course. Not only you should have pleasure from these things. Yeah. If that wasn't clear, then let's make this clear. Judaism, you have a tremendous amount of pleasure from things that you do. Tremendous amount. There's it's amazing. Shabbat. You could go on and on learning Torah. There's tremendous amount of pleasure, and not that you're not allowed. Of course, you're allowed to get pleasure from these things, and you're required to get pleasure from these things. But when you're going, and you could even go, you get to the point where you're coming to classes, you're learning Torah because you're enjoying it. You're doing it because you're enjoying it, and that is fine. But the source of you following God and doing in Judaism is not because to get something from me. That is not the ultimate point. The ultimate point is because this is what God wants and this is what God asked. Now, even though that's just one nuance in idolatry, that's not the fact. There's many different problems with idolatry. The idolatry is not the only problem. It's only about me. That's just one of the many problems. And also another problem is that you're focusing. You're praying to a fake God. You're praying. God gave you everything, and then you're going. It's sort of be considered committed adultery. You're cheating. You're going and you're worshiping a fake, false idol. There's many problems that you're dealing with idolatry. This is just one of them. One of the many issues. If, let's say, you go and you decide that the purpose of it all for Judaism, let's say, and let me make this very clear, let's say the purpose of all Judaism is so I should get reward. That's all I'm doing it for. I'm doing it, I know God said it, but I don't care. I'm doing it for reward.
God said it so we can get reward.
Yeah, I'm giving you this hypothetical situation, right? You're doing it only for reward. For olam haba, for whatever it is, you're doing it for reward. That is not considered idolatry. In fact, keep on doing what you're doing. That's fine. That is 100% okay. That is not considered idolatry. Idolatry is not something that you're doing something good for your own benefit. So I hope this is very clear. It doesn't mean that I'm doing something and I'm doing it only because of my own benefit and then it makes it idolatry. Not at all. You can do many good things for your own benefit and that's considered that it's a great thing. What I'm saying by idolatry is all about me. It's one of the foundations of what idolatry represents. The focus is all about me. And Judaism, your focus could be about you. The focus could be about God. It should be about God, but it could be about you also. It doesn't change the fact that you're doing the right thing. It doesn't make it idolatry. Maybe that's where I lost you guys over there about it. Because it's 100% okay to do that way. You could do it. You could serve God out of getting reward. It's fine. You know, there's a Mishnah Pirkei Avot. You had, you know, the Tzedukim. They came out, you know, because from the master that went, and they heard the master says, you're not supposed to serve God for getting reward. So they misunderstood it and said, oh, you know, that means that you don't get reward. So what's the point of being Jewish? What's the point of doing everything? So they went and they became secular. Whatever, they twisted the Torah. Of course, you're allowed to serve God if you're getting reward. You're allowed to serve God if you're getting benefit, and ultimately you will be getting a benefit from it. And that's not considered idolatry. What I'm saying is that idolatry, one of the foundations of idolatry, is it happens to be it's all about me. It doesn't make it that everything that you do that is about me makes it idolatry. It's just one of the forces of idolatry. Same thing as anger. Is that clear? I feel now I'm clear, and now I felt like it came out clear. I just told you, so you all have to nod. Be like, now you all understand it. Okay.
No, because you're saying because once it's not about once
I
you
understand
get what you want,
right.
Then you just drop it.
Right. I understand what words I said that I should have. You know. Okay. So thank you for correcting that. Any other questions?
So even if you're praying for something for a really long time and absolutely nothing's changing, it's just
keep on praying. Yes, if you're praying and praying and praying and praying and praying and praying and praying, and it doesn't happen, then you keep on praying and praying and praying and praying and praying and praying and praying. Maybe you could change your things a little bit. You know, maybe do a little bit tshuva. Maybe this is you know. We'll speak about prayer in Lent. I want to. There's a whole class I want to give on you know why God doesn't answer prayers. But you know whatever. It's, you know in due time. Okay. No other questions? Questions? Okay, we'll do it off camera. Okay.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.